Hello and welcome to episode 72 of This Week in Germany. We'll be bringing the world to Germany and Germany to the world with news for the week beginning the 18th of May 2015. My name's Daniel.
And I am Felix, standing in for Rob. Each week we feature stories from news, society and culture in the English language. If you want to find out more, including ways to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, head over to thisweekingermany.de.
And Felix, it's your last episode filling in for Rob this week.
It is, and yeah, it's been 3 exciting episodes so far.
Well, thank you very much for your help while Rob was away. And how was your week? Did you get up to anything interesting this week?
I did. I actually recorded my first English-speaking podcast for my own channel, ammikrofon.de. In fact, I was invited by a boarding school in Switzerland to portray one of their teachers who happens to be a famous mountaineer. There's even an IMAX movie about him, so that's kind of cool. And he took me on a hike together with 9 students. They were like 15 years old, and I featured him. So this is going to be a really nice documentary. Great chance for me too.
Okay, Ammikrofon is where you can hear that. What do we have coming up on the program today, Felix? We're not going to go into detail about Germany's next top model. It's not really my kind of thing, and I guess it's not yours either. But we have lots of genuinely interesting and fascinating things coming up today.
Well, thanks very much. The top model is not the top story. In fact, it's the BND scandal. And there's updates that you're going to present to us.
Yes, what's the BND again? Can you remind us?
Bundesnachrichtendienst, to pronounce it correctly in German, which is the major German spy agency.
Yes. Then we've got the news in brief, of course, as usual. Well, we'll have lots of the latest news from this week. And then I have an interview with the author and history professor, Robert Beachy, who's going to be talking about Berlin's gay history. Now, Sunday was the International Day Against Homophobia. So it's good timing, and I don't know if you knew this, Felix, but before the Nazi era, there was a really flourishing gay scene in Berlin, and it is surprising how out and almost how public the whole scene was. You'd be quite surprised that the gay rights movement seems to go back well before the kind of 60s and 70s when it really got going.
I really didn't know that. I didn't know that Berlin was so liberal way before, well, the areas, the times that we're living now in.
From as early as around 1890, so all that'll come out, no pun intended, in my interview with Robert Beachy later on. And then we have a destination Germany, don't we?
We do, yeah. We're going to the biosphere this time. And I'm pretty sure that Rob is going to help us presenting this part, isn't he?
Who knows? Could be just like last time.
Yeah. And then we are having Christian Lindner as the German of the Week. I'm going to talk about him. He's the General Secretary of the FDP, Liberal Party in Germany. And yep, he's just been re-elected. Yeah,
a party which completely failed from the top of German politics to almost the bottom. And so he's the guy who's going to apparently rejuvenate the party. Very, very interesting. So that's everything that's coming up on the episode of This Week in Germany, episode number 72. But now let's start with our top story. It's the story that just won't die, and something which is proving to be a big pain in the behind for Germany's top-level politicians. It's now clear that the German Foreign Intelligence Service helped the NSA with its spying activities. You'd expect international cooperation when it came to issues of national security, such as terrorism, but the Bundesnachrichtendienst apparently snooped on European politicians and companies for the USA.
And how did they do this? How did this cooperation come along? How was it again?
Well, we don't really know exactly the roots of it, but it came out recently that basically the NSA had sent search requests called selectors to a spy station in Germany called Bad Aibling. And basically, these were aimed at high-level European politicians and even companies as well. That's the information that's coming out. But of course, we do not have the full open report on what's happening, because the actual list of selectors, that's the search details basically, has not been released.
That is true, but I heard the figures are growing and growing, isn't it? How many selectors is it this week now that apparently were used? Do you know?
Well, there are around about 25,000 so-called active selectors. That's thousands more than the Bundesnachrichtendienst previously informed the Chancellery of. And this is just what's came out this week. So before, it was apparently, the BND apparently informed the Chancellery that there were 12,000 active search requests from the NSA to the German Secret Service. But it's been revealed that there's a lot more, 25,000. But the key problem that's come about this week is that this list of selectors has not been passed over to the Parliamentary Control Committee and the NSA Investigation Committee of the Bundestag. So even the control committees, which are meant to have a handle on, meant to independently investigate the activities of the spy agencies in Germany, do not have access to this list.
And what is the excuse, the reason why they don't have access? Do we know?
Basically, we're waiting for approval from the USA to hand over this list from the Chancellery to the independent investigatory committees. And of course, this is very controversial.
That is very controversial. What are the other parties thinking about that?
SPD's General Secretary, Yasmin Fahimi, so she's in the centre-left party, which is in government. They say that the Chancellery should not beg deferentially to Washington for permission to publish that list. Now, we're not even talking about publishing it publicly, but even just to send copies to these secret investigation committees. And she told the newspaper, the Tagesspiegel, on Sunday, and I quote, "We cannot turn ourselves into the vassals of the USA and ignore the rights of the Bundestag." Other parties such as Die Linke are also asking for this list to be published. But there is a little bit of basically controversy, because others in the Bundestag, other parties in the Bundestag, are saying that we should wait until we even get a reply from Washington to say whether the lists can be distributed or not. So it's a really uncomfortable situation for the Chancellor, because people are asking whether she knew what happened and whether she is in control of her Chancellery and the oversight of the spy agencies in Germany. So it's a difficult situation.
And I'm afraid this topic will accompany us for many more episodes, right? Because it just gets deeper and deeper. Like every week, I feel there's more and more coming up, and there's just no answer to it. And the politicians who should answer just don't dare to say anything or wait for approval from the US. Very weird construction.
Yeah, and a very, very complex story as well. And the outpouring of rage from the SPD and the FDP political parties, we'll be talking about the FDP later, this outrage is understandable, as they have political points to score. They have reasons politically to criticize the CDU party and get them to pass this information over to the independent parliamentary control committees. But just because they've got political points to score does not make this situation any less critical. We put an immense amount of trust in our spy agencies. Much of their work is valuable and has to be done hidden away from the public. We understand that. But spying on our neighbours and partners for the benefit of a third party suggests our agencies can be manipulated.
Now for this week's News in Brief. Foreign Minister Frank-Walter Steinmeier has openly discussed the idea of a common EU-wide scheme on taking in Syrian refugees. He did so at a press conference this Saturday while visiting Jordan. Close to 4 million Syrians have fled their countries since the conflict began in 2011. Neighboring countries such as Turkey, Lebanon and Jordan have taken in the majority of refugees. Germany has temporarily allowed 130,000 refugees to enter the country so far. 70,000 of these have officially applied for asylum. Steinmeier notes that not all EU countries offer an equal share when it comes to taking in Syrians in need. A regional train has collided with a farming vehicle in North Rhine-Westphalia. 2 people were killed, including the train's conductor and 1 passenger. 20 others were injured. The incident happened after the train, coming from nearby Osnabrück in Lower Saxony, hit a slurry truck, police say. The truck became stuck at a level crossing. The 23-year-old driver survived unscathed and is now under investigation. In a policy proposal for Parliament, Christian Democrat Joachim Pfeiffer and Green Party member Dieter Janecek put forward their plan for the liberalization of cannabis products. Both questioned whether criminalizing the drug for recreational purposes still made sense. Janecek and Pfeiffer estimated a state-regulated market for cannabis would raise up to 2 billion euros in tax revenue. While the German party has long advocated decriminalizing marijuana, having a member of the governing union of the conservative Christian Democrats on board adds a new dimension to the debate. Pfeiffer is also CDU's economic policy spokesman. The initiative was immediately criticized by Germany's Federal Drug Commissioner Marlene Mortler. She said decriminalizing cannabis was not a good idea as society has enough problems with alcohol and tobacco already. As of now, it's hard to estimate how much traction the proposal will gain at this early stage. And that's this week's news in brief. Do you fancy getting a bi-weekly update from us with the best of this week in Germany? Sign up to our email newsletter in the sidebar at thisweekingermany.de.
Sunday the 17th was the International Day Against Homophobia. While there are still a few challenges to equality, Germany is a fairly open place when it comes to homosexuality, especially in the big cities. This progressive outlook has history to thank. Did you know that the word homosexuality was invented in Germany? Or did you know that Berlin was the world's center for research into gay culture and behavior? In fact, before the oppressive years of the Nazis, Berlin was a hotspot for cross-dressing balls and gay bars for socializing as far back as the late 19th century. To find out about Germany's gay legacy, I'm joined by Robert Beachy, history professor at Yonsei University in Seoul and author of Gay Berlin, Birthplace of a Modern Identity. So, Robert, can you tell us a little bit about your book, Gay Berlin?
Sure thing. Well, the time frame that it covers is roughly the last third of the 19th century, late 1800s, into the 20th century, through the 1920s, and then into the early 1930s. So it stops more or less with the Nazi seizure of power in 1933. And it's in part a survey, but it's also a study of how a community in Berlin helped to establish what I've described as a new modern sexual identity and sort of make claims for the rights of this sexual minority as it came to be defined by the beginning of the 20th century.
Was there a real widespread gay culture in Berlin before the Nazi period? As we know, the Nazis cracked down on homosexuals. And were the police tough on gays?
Well, that's, I suppose, relative. And I think you'd have to say that in the context of the late 19th and early 20th century, the police, especially in Berlin, were actually quite tolerant. And it was a kind of enlightened, self-interested tolerance. And it was based on a policy that was developed by a single police officer. His name was Merkel. And he quickly realized that it was going to be really difficult to enforce this anti-gay law. And so he decided that it would make more sense to allow, especially men, but also to some extent women, to congregate essentially in their own bars and pubs. And as long as they behaved themselves, he would not try to close these establishments or these venues. And as a result, Berlin already by the very beginning of the 20th century, the very early 1900s, had what was already recognized throughout a lot of Europe as the most flamboyant and the most widespread, the largest gay subculture in Europe, pretty much.
Am I right in saying that the police attended some of these balls and even gave tours of the nightlife hotspots, let's say?
Yes, absolutely. They were almost always in attendance. So even if they were tolerant to some extent, they were also always paying very close attention to what was going on. And that was actually the real reason for the tolerance. They felt that they would have a better chance of keeping tabs on this subculture, if they could also know more about it and always be able to monitor it. But in addition to that, they also, as you just pointed out, would literally give tours to different sorts of psychiatrists, doctors, visiting celebrities in some cases, journalists, sort of urban ethnographers. So there was literally a parade of people who would come to Berlin already starting in the 1890s and would be given a tour of Berlin's gay nightlife. And so this business of, I guess, slumming was something that was already established and then also facilitated by the police starting even a little before 1900, which is really remarkable.
And Germany was also the center of research into sexual behavior around this time, right?
That's right. And it's this police policy, again, that I think one would have to recognize played a pretty big role, because by tolerating these kinds of bars and other organizations and clubs, it made it possible for psychiatrists and physicians and medical doctors to actually study this subculture. They had easier access. And that was one of the advantages for sexologists and psychiatrists in Berlin. They really had something like a laboratory for learning something about sexual minorities. And this never existed in quite the same way in any other major city at this point.
Was there a standout researcher from that time who you think contributed the most to this movement into research into sexual persuasions? Well,
the person that I would name, and the one who comes immediately to mind, is Magnus Hirschfeld. And he was a German Jewish physician. He started a practice in Berlin, I think, in 1896. And he also then founded the very first homosexual rights movement just a short time after this. And along with his political activism, he was an incredibly prolific researcher and writer. And so he was really one of the very first sexologists who studied the subculture carefully and tried to describe and tabulate everything that he saw. He was, to some extent, also an inspiration for Kinsey in the United States some 50 years later. There were, of course, though, others. I mean, there was another very prominent Berlin psychiatrist named Albert Moll, and he published the first work that was devoted entirely to this phenomenon of homosexuality already in 1891. And it was also based in large part on his study of the Berlin subculture. He also thanks the Berlin police commissioner, Meerscheid Hulessum, for giving him tours of this subculture. So he also relied on different kinds of police files that were provided for him. So he really had a lot of insider knowledge. But it's this access, this insider knowledge that makes it possible, I think, for this discipline of sexology and sort of allied disciplines like psychiatry to really flourish in a place like Berlin by about 1900.
Well, I think many people are aware of the oppression that gays faced during the Nazi period. It is absolutely fascinating to read about as you described it, the flourishing of the culture before the Nazis came into power. And so I'd recommend anyone who is interested in finding out more to read Robert Beachy's book, Gay Berlin, Birthplace of a Modern Identity, which is being released soon in German as Das andere Berlin, and you can get that on amazon.de. So, Robert Beachy, thank you very much for joining me here on This Week in Germany.
Thank you so much, Daniel. It was great to talk with you.
Felix, what's coming up now?
Coming up right now, Destination Germany. Here we're taking you again on a journey to somewhere in the country which is well worth a visit. Whether you're a tourist or a permanent resident, a foreigner or a German citizen. Here we'll be covering the famous sites as well as the little-known corners of Deutschland. All that matters is showing you that Germany is an interesting and exciting place to visit. If you enjoy the destinations we talk about each week, check out the website at thisweekingermany.de, where we will have some photos of this week's destination.
Felix, you're a German. Do you think Germany is an exciting place to visit?
Oh, I am. I've been living in many other countries for months at a time or a year and longer, and I enjoy coming back every time. it's getting actually better and better.
That is the correct answer, because we're going to do Destination Germany, whether you like it or not, because we've got no other plans to do anything else. Last week we went to the Dutch Quarter in Potsdam, and it was really pretty cool because there's Dutch architecture there from the 1700s. Not only that, but a thriving Dutch culture that takes place in these 4 square blocks. People come from all over to check out the style, as well as the goings-on, the happenings that take place in this little borough, this little area of Potsdam. And in fact, they just had a tulip festival, which went throughout the streets in that area. Sounds pretty nice. I might have to check that out next year when the tulip festival is back. But now we have on the line Rob. Welcome, Rob.
I'm back again.
Hello. What a surprise.
I've had a great vacation so far here in the United States, but I am excited that I will be back next week in Germany, back to the regular scheduled show.
Nice to hear that you're equally excited coming back to Germany.
Yes, I am. So many great places to visit here.
I'm glad you said that, Rob, because I believe you have another destination to tell us about.
I do indeed. Would you like to hear about it?
Well, maybe next week. Let's do something else this time. Please, come on, guys.
Go on, Rob. I think we'll let you have your moment in the spotlight.
Yes, you were just talking about the Tulip Festival, I believe, that happened in Potsdam. We're going to stay in Potsdam. And if you like flowers but have missed the Tulip Festival, we've got something for you. In Potsdam, there is what's known as a biosphere.
What is that? It's like a dome which has its own little like wildlife, habitat and climate and animals and everything?
That's exactly what it is. There are quite a few of those here in Germany, too. You could be on a tropical island, a ski slope, and now a jungle landscape, open year-round.
So if you are a plant junkie, you can go there to get your flower fix. Is that a good way of putting it? Is that what the biosphere is known for, like all of its flowers and stuff?
Flowers and plants, yeah, definitely known for its flowers and plants. They boast a staggering number of 20,000 plants there. It's like, or rather it is, a rainforest, and so you just feel like you're right in the middle of all these different deep shades of green. But don't worry, there's flowers as well as fruit trees, and you'll get a lot of vibrant colors mixed in there as well.
So how do they manage to have an entire rainforest in Potsdam? Like, how much space does that biosphere need?
The grounds for the rainforest of the biosphere take up 7,000 square meters. And while it's not a full forest by any means, it is quite expansive. And visitors really get a feel for what it's like to be in the middle of a rainforest.
Okay, I can imagine going in there, being in this rainforest, and I imagine there's going to be poisonous spiders and snakes on the ground. There's going to be terrible weather. I'm going to need an umbrella, right?
Well, it is a rainforest, so I got it. But actually, the biosphere does have a thunderstorm that goes on hourly. And don't worry, though, you don't need an umbrella. There are places for visitors to take cover. As for the climate, make sure you don't dress too warmly before going in, as temperatures go up to 28 degrees. And while that might not seem too high, the humidity is what makes it seem even hotter. Almost 80% humidity. Maybe you should bring that umbrella.
Well, going back to the wildlife that Daniel just mentioned, like, what is there to expect? Like, do you have snakes or wild animals? Like, what's going on there?
Nothing like massive gorillas, but they do have a variety of different tropical animals. Many different reptiles and amphibians are crawling around, and if you look overhead, you'll see lots of different species of birds flying or nesting in trees. If insects are your things, kind of freaks me out personally, there are terrariums to view these little guys through.
I'm glad they're not just going to crawl onto you. And I'm also glad, as you mentioned, that there are not gorillas, unless you count the other guests. Am I right? Is the forest divided up in any way, or like into zones, or is it one big, giant forest room?
Ooh, I don't want to forget real quick. Speaking of animals, there are 2 separate different areas. There's also a aquasphere for tropical fish, and there's a butterfly house with thousands of butterflies from all over the world.
And do they have special events? I mean, I'm not talking about like me renting out this place with my buddies, but like, what kind of events are going on there? If
Felix, I could imagine you hosting your jungle music party in there, having a rave in the middle of the jungle. I'm sure they don't allow you to host those kind of events there, do they, Rob?
You might have to call and check first, but I'm not sure if they're going to allow having a techno music party inside of there. But they do have a special event coming up starting next month called Garbage in the Sea Affects Us All. I know that doesn't sound like the happiest theme, but it is important, and the Biosphere wants to present an exhibition that is fun and informative to really get this point across. Another one coming up in September, though, is called Carnivorous Plants, which I think sounds pretty interesting to see. Think about just plants eating other animals live.
What? They're gonna feed these carnivorous plants right in front of you? That's I guess you have to stand back so you don't get eaten by these plants.
Those mega carnivorous plants.
They snap quickly.
I do want to say they have some weekly events as well, though. So on Saturdays and Sundays, you can go in and feed the fish in a koi pond. And on Mondays, if you're over 60, you can get in for free. Also, all week, during the mornings, you can go there and have a brunch with your friends right in the middle of a rainforest.
That's absolutely beautiful, so you can have a few frog sandwiches. Maybe not. I don't know. I have not been there.
But if you want to see more, definitely go to our website, thisweekingermany.de, and we'll have some photos of this destination.
You've been well trained, Rob. Very good. So Felix has done a great job presenting the past few weeks, don't you think?
Definitely. It sounds really good.
And sadly, this is Felix's last episode filling in for you. You're going to be back next week.
I am, but hopefully Felix will be back at some point.
Well, I'd like to be back. It was definitely a pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show.
So, see you next week, Rob.
See you then.
And next up, our German of the Week section, where we put the spotlight on a prominent person from this week's news, a German citizen or even a foreigner who we deem an honorary German who's had an effect, for better or worse, on German culture, society or politics.
Our German of the Week this week is Christian Lindner. He entered the limelight this week as the freshly re-elected party leader of Germany's pro-business Free Democrats called FDP. The darkest hours of the party's history came in 2013. Since then, they have been looking for rejuvenation and a new direction. The FDP failed to return to parliament in the last federal elections. They missed the 5% threshold needed to gain seats. This is the first time they have been out of parliament since 1949. It came as a shock, especially after just passing a full term as the minority coalition partner in federal government. The then 34-year-old Lindner managed to win party members' trust and confidence by promising a brighter future. He was consequently elected as the youngest leader in FDP history. The current re-election shows the trust he inherits. Born in Wuppertal in North Rhine-Westphalia in 1979, Lindner joined the local FDP at the age of 16. He quickly entered the executive board on state level and eventually became its secretary general in 2004. This was even before he finished his studies of political science in 2006. Lindner was confirmed in his office this past weekend with 92% of votes. This, he hopes, gives him the mandate to lead the party to new significance on federal level in 2017.
And now we're coming to the end of episode 72. We put a ton of work into this week's episode, as we do in every episode, hours and hours and hours of our free time. So Felix, if our listeners want to support This Week in Germany, how can they do it?
Well, share it, tell your friends, like our Facebook posts, retweet our messages, subscribe on iTunes and get the word out there. All our social media links are on our website, thisweekingermany.de.
And if you could give us the full 5-star rating in iTunes, we would very much appreciate it, because that's how we can reach even more people who are interested in Germany just like you. This Week in Germany is produced by me, Daniel Winter. It is written and presented by myself, Felix Betzin and Rob Bishop.
We'd like to thank Robert Beachy, history professor at Yonsei University in Seoul and author of Gay Berlin, Birthplace of a Modern Identity. You can listen to the interview with him in full in the Twig Extra section of our website.
Thank you for listening. We'll be back in 7 days with more of This Week in Germany.